The rabbis of the Talmud tell a story about God on the precipice of creating human beings. God pauses to ask the ministering angels in heaven, "Do you agree that we should make human beings in our image?" The angels replied, "Sovereign of the universe, what will be humans' deeds?" As if taking them on a tour through time, God shows the angels the history of mankind, the good, the bad, and the ugly. The angels reply, "God, how could you even think of creating such a destructive creature?" Dissatisfied with their response, God destroyed the angels. And God created a second group of angels, asked them the same question, and they responded with the same answer. God destroyed them too. God created a third group of angels. God asked them if humans should be created, and they replied, "Sovereign of the universe, the first and the second group of angels told you not to create humans, but you didn't listen. What then can we say but this? The universe is yours. Do with it as you wish." And God created the first human being. When it came to the generation of the flood and then to the generation of the builders of the Tower of Babel, the angels said to God, "Were not the first angels right? See how great the corruption of mankind is. We told you so." To that, God replied, "Even to old age I will not change. Even to gray hair, I will be patient." We often consider the most pressing religious mystery of our lifetime to be the question of our faith in God. How could God have created a world so cruel, so full of fear, of hate, and harm? How could we believe in a God who would create such a world? But this Talmudic story invites us to ask the question in reverse. Knowing full well the horror, the evil of which we human beings are capable, how could God believe in us? Among many of the names for God, our Torah describes God as El Emunah, usually translated as the God of faith. Because it takes some serious faith to believe in God. But another rabbinic midrash changes the meaning, translating El Emunah as not as a faithful God, a God that believes in our world and chose to create it. Last week, Rabbi and theologian Shai Held was here with our community teaching about his new book, Judaism is About Love. In his book, Held writes that God knows who we are. God knows the cruelty and the callousness of which we are capable. And yet, in the face of that, somehow God still believes in us. God believes not only in our capacity for love, but also that our potential for goodness will outweigh our potential for evil. In a world so mangled, so broken by the events of this past year, I can't help but wonder, what is God's breaking point? When does humanity's potential for evil outweigh our potential for good? How much violence, how much destruction will it take for even God to lose faith in humanity? For even God to regret creating human beings? This wouldn't be the first time that God regretted creating us. In the time of Noah and his ark, we are told, Vatimaleh haaretz chamas. The world was filled with Hamas. It's not by chance that the modern Hamas chose this word as the name for their movement. In Arabic, it is an acronym for the Islamic resistance movement. In Hebrew, Hamas means hatred, violence, evil. In Noah's generation, the human capacity for evil got out of hand. Every plan devised by human minds was nothing but evil all the time. Rak ra kol hayom. Vayinachem Adonai ki asa et ha'adam ba'aretz, vayit'atzev el libo. The Torah tells us that God regretted making human beings, and God's heart was saddened. God reached God's breaking point. The world was filled with unabated Hamas, hatred, and God lost faith in humanity. So God decided to destroy humanity and to start again, save for one decent human being, Noah, and his family. When Noah emerged safely from the ark at the end of the 40-day flood that wiped out the rest of humanity, God made a promise that the world would never be destroyed again. Since the devisings of the human mind are evil, ki yetzer lev ha'adam ra. At first glance, this pasuk seems to argue that human beings are not essentially good, but rather essentially evil. Biblical commentator Chizkuni uses the phrase to argue that actually we are not doomed to evil. Human beings have the unique capacity to grow in love. We can overcome this evil inclination by practicing acts of chesed or loving kindness, by fighting against evil inclination with more goodness. We human beings will always reserve the right to exist. The word for God's regret in Hebrew, vayinachem, is related to the word for consolation, nechama. Parshat Noach teaches us that from God's regret comes an opportunity to heal. Calling out Hamas, rampant hatred, when we see it, gives us an opportunity to do the work of chesed, of tikkun, of mending and healing our broken world. Next week on Yom Kippur, we will knock our hearts and admit to ourselves, Chamasnu. We ourselves have participated, have engaged in spreading evil. We have hated. We have acted violently. But the difference between us and the generation of Noach is that we will not let this violence and hatred go unchecked. What purpose would this admonition of regret, that recognition of harm next week serve, if not to encourage and move us to take action? to do better, to act with love, with compassion, with chesed. Every day when I daven the Amidah, I knock my fist over my heart, admonishing myself for my own mistakes. Selach lanu avinu ki chatanu. Mechal lanu malkenu ki fashanu. Forgive me, God. I am human, and so I have caused harm. But it doesn't end there. I open my fist, rest it over my heart, and I allow myself a moment to believe that even though I am human, even though I make mistakes, and I might hurt other people in the process, I can try again. Every day I remind myself graciously and gently, with nechama, with consolation, that I believe in my own ability to do better. What would it take for all of us to believe in ourselves like that? To believe in the way that God believes in our ultimate goodness? To say to ourselves, even though I grow older, even as I see more and more hate in this world, I will be patient. I will seek love when all I see is hate. I will do acts of chesed, of loving kindness, to rebalance this world that seems so inclined toward destruction. For Rachel and John Goldberg-Polin, even the kidnapping and the execution of their beloved son Hirsch by Hamas terrorists could not take away their hope for a better world, for a better tomorrow. Today, by the way, would be Hirsch's 24th birthday. Though John and Rachel wish that they had never been given this platform, they have captured so many of our hearts because of their belief in hope, in choosing compassion, in the ultimate goodness of humanity. In the still early days since Hirsch's abduction, Rachel shared a poem that she penned for a mother in Gaza. Way over there, Rachel wrote, there is another woman who looks just like me, because we are all so very similar. And she has also been crying. All those tears, a sea of tears. Can we take them, gather them up, remove the salt, and pour them over our desert of despair? To plant one tiny seed and see what grows? Imagine having your child taken from you, and instead of responding to that level of evil with evil in return, responding from a place of hope, of love. Through her pain and her heartbreak, Rachel has reminded us of our end of the bargain. That when Hamas inevitably rears its ugly head in this world, we must make sure that chesed will prevail. Our Torah teaches that the world stands upon three things: the Torah, worship, and acts of loving kindness. Al shlosha devarim ha'olam omed, al haTorah, ve'al ha'avodah, ve'al gemilut chasadim. In our community last Shabbat, Shai Held wondered aloud why Judaism stands on 3 legs and not 2. Are not 2 legs enough to keep us grounded, to keep us standing, to keep us strong? Held argues that the third leg upon which to stand ensures that even if one of the legs should crumble, Judaism will continue to remain standing tall. In ancient times, our rabbis relied on the pillars of Torah and avodah, worship in the form of temple sacrifice. When the temple was destroyed, upon seeing it lying in ruins, the rabbis cried, "Woe unto us that this place, the place where the iniquities of Israel were atoned for, is laid waste. On what will we stand now? How will we serve God? How will we atone for our sins and bring goodness into the world now without the temple?" But not even a full 7 days after the saddest day of the year, Tisha B'Av, the day that commemorates the destruction of our temple, our rabbis instituted a day for love. Jewish Valentine's Day, Tu B'Av. In the wake of destruction and devastation, the rabbis reminded us we have another leg to stand on, and that is chesed, loving kindness. Trauma can lead us to retreat into ourselves, to withdraw from community, and even perhaps to wish that same pain that we are experiencing on others. But our tradition makes a stunning claim: to heal from loss, respond with love. Respond with chesed. It seems that everywhere I turn, people are responding from October 7th with love. In late July, hundreds of our people gathered in Jerusalem's Baka neighborhood to complete a new Torah scroll dedicated to the hostages who remain held in Gaza. The Torah Scroll Project was initiated by Rachel and John as a week of goodness, an effort led by the families to inspire acts of kindness, storming and flooding the world with more goodness. Across Israeli society, people spent that week doing acts of chesed. Events during the week included opportunities to volunteer, to study, to pray, to sing, to bake. My cousins, among so many Israelis, spent the week packaging boxes for those living with food insecurity and cleaning up a forest where John often rides his bike. Chesed counters Hamas. Chesed begets chesed. When we plant seeds of love, we ensure continued growth and spreading of that love. John and Rachel's radical call to turn from their hurt and put our energy toward chesed was evidently contagious. In Israel, WhatsApp groups are flooded with messages of community initiatives for high school students to sit beside younger children in shul whose families are in reserves. People are organizing to make sure that families of reservists have homes to go to for the holidays, for meals. One evacuee family from Shlomi in northern Israel had to close their shoe business because of the ongoing war. They posted on Facebook that they are donating the shoes to needy children. The title of their post was Olam Chesed Yibaneh, we will build a world of loving kindness. On the Shabbat, after the Jewish world received the heartbreaking news that the bodies of 6 hostages had been recovered from Gaza, Rabbi Sharon Brous of Ikar in Los Angeles remarked that the death of Hirsch felt like the death of hope. I certainly felt a sense of exasperation, of despair. I lost hope. I felt like giving up. Die, khalas, how much more can we take? I turned my phone on that Saturday evening, absorbing the news of the fate of these 6 hostages just as I was preparing to lead a Havdalah service for my childhood camp friends, whose wedding I was set to officiate the next day. How much easier it would have been to excuse myself from this gathering, to slip away from the joyful occasion, and to wallow in despair. How much simpler it would have been to give up, overwhelmed by the weight of sorrow that seemed to hang in the air. And then I remembered Rachel's poem. And I remembered the Week of Chesed initiative from only 1 month earlier. I remembered so many of our people's calls to bring more light into our shattered world. As I stood surrounded by my closest friends, we linked arms and began to sing, Hine el Yeshuati, Eftach velo efchad. Here you are, God of redemption. I will trust in you. I will not be afraid. With the flame of the Havdalah candle, my friends and I brought just a little bit of light into the darkness of that moment. By celebrating the love of our friends whose partnership will surely bring more goodness and more light into our world, we affirmed the power of hope in a world overshadowed by grief. The power of chesed in a world so full of Hamas. We can always choose light. We can always choose hope. We can always choose chesed. At Hirsch's funeral, instead of using the common phrase for victims of terror, Hashem yikom damo, or God will avenge his blood, John eulogized his precious and beloved son with the words, Yahi zichrono mehapecha. May his memory be a revolution for good. John and Rachel could have cursed their child's captors. They could have let their grief consume and extinguish their sense of hope. That perhaps would have been more obvious. I admit that would have been my own first inclination. And that would have been far less brave. Instead, John and Rachel eulogized their beautiful son by calling out to the world, inviting more kindness, more goodness, more light, more chesed. If even John and Rachel can muster a sense of hope as they eulogize and remember their sweet boy, if even those most deeply and immediately harmed by Hamas, by hatred and evil in this world, can still believe in humanity, then surely God must believe in us. And if God believes in us, then surely we must believe in ourselves. Shana Tova.